Good morning, good afternoon, and/or good evening, everybody. And I'm very pleased to welcome you all to INC's annual virtual workshop. I would have very much liked to see you in person in Amsterdam, but for now, a virtual format will have to do. Thank you so much again for joining us today. Right after my welcome here, we're going to do a 30-minute work group updates, followed by opening remarks from Joseph Sheeran, who's the Chief Executive Officer of CPATH, and Ralph Bax, who's the Head of Pediatric Medicines at European Medicines Agency. Then for today, there are two main sessions. First one is the clinical trial design and execution, and the second one is racial and health equity in neonatal research. Before we proceed to the workgroup updates, I do have a few very important announcements. First one is this workshop is going to be recorded, and within 24 hours, attendees and registrants can view the recordings on their computer whenever they want to do that. Then if at any time you have any questions, please make sure to put your questions in the QA box right at the bottom of the screen. Third is that the on-demand materials can be found in the resources area. Then a very important announcement, just in an off chance that there is a platform outage. Right now we're using Global Meet platform. In case there is a platform outage, we do have a backup platform and backup plans ready. And right as soon as we see that there is a technical issue, we will be sending you emails with further instructions on an alternative platform that we've already prepared. Finally, please follow CPATH on social media, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And if you are going to be talking about this meeting in any of your social media channels, please make sure to use the hashtag INC2020 words whenever you're talking about the meeting. That will basically just give more visibility to the meeting. And with that, I am going to give the mic to Kelly Wade, who is going to present a 15-minute introduction and updates about the communications workgroup that we have at INC.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. No matter what time zone you're in, I'm glad you're here with us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kelly Wade. I'm a neonatologist for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and in coordination with my co-chair, Mary Short from Eli Lilly, I'm happy to provide an update from the INC communication group. As you know, INC is a multi-stakeholder consortium, and these are the hardworking members of the communications group. What's striking about this group is the inclusion of parents, nurses, physicians, and representatives of industry and regulatory agencies. The communications work group helps to elevate the voice and perspectives of all stakeholders, including those of the nurses and parents who are valued members of the neonatal care team. At INC, we're stronger together as we work to address the unmet needs of drug development needs for neonates. And this critical path graphic on the left really highlights the coordination of efforts among the wide variety of stakeholders across the globe. Clearly, multi-stakeholder perspectives promote progress. The graphic on the right shows the 20 INC deliverables over the last 5 years. Those in dark blue are already published. Over the past 6 months, the communications group reviewed these projects and found that these deliverables encompass 4 major themes. The first is general neonatal drug research, including regulatory science and global collaboration. The second was specific research design, including enrollment in more than one trial and trial design for specific conditions such as seizures or NEC. The third was development of outcome measures, such as the important work in chronic pulmonary insufficiency, vision outcomes for ROP, and neurodevelopment. Standardization of safety and adverse event reporting for neonates is the fourth theme that we categorized. But have you ever wondered what happens after these projects are published? And how can we communicate this immense amount of work to the larger neonatal community? Advancing the unmet needs of drug development is difficult, but together we're moving forward. And this summer, the communications group reviewed INC progress and pondered these two questions. How do we remain inclusive and engage the different stakeholders in INC to best serve our neonatal mission? And how do we communicate the work of INC to the larger stakeholder communities? To address these questions, the communication group decided to focus on key message development for each of the INC deliverables, past, present, and future. But why key messages? Key messages promote progress. They provide a primary information you want your audience to understand and remember. They help you articulate what your organization is doing and the value those projects bring to different stakeholders. Effective examples of key messaging by the Children's Oncology Group and the NICU Parent Network are shown on this slide. Once key messages are crafted, then media design teams can effectively produce materials such as these to share those messages with the broader community. This slide also highlights the voices of NICU parents and the power of their stories, which were highlighted in this Journal of Pediatrics piece. The strength of INC and the progress we make relies on multiple stakeholders. In the communications group, we think key messages will promote inclusion and progress. So today, I'm happy to announce to the larger group the successful launch of the MASH Inc. project, Messaging Across Stakeholder Groups for Inc. The specific aim of this project is to develop key messages for INC deliverables from the perspective of each stakeholder group, as noted here. We plan to communicate INC progress to the larger community, amplify and support the perspectives of all stakeholders, and promote a positive research culture for neonates as we address their unmet drug development needs. We work to develop a process of 3 phases for which we're going to go through each key message development task. We wanted to start on one deliverable, and the communication group voted to start on key message development for the NAESS, which is the Neonatal Adverse Event Severity Score tool developed by the INC Safety Group and published in 2019. In phase 1, we brainstorm key message concepts with internal stakeholder, identifying our goals, needs, and audiences, in order to identify the communication goals and messaging needs in reference to the specific project here, the NAESS. We drafted messages by answering specific questions, such as what is the overarching message do you want to tell the target audience or stakeholders about your issue, and why is this overarching message important to them? We added an INC specific question, which is how does this INC project promote a positive research culture? In phase 2, we're refining draft key messages, asking the questions, do they support our goals and needs, and are they valuable to each of the stakeholder target audiences? In phase 3 is where we will refine, test, finalize, and distribute, testing those messages to ensure that they resonate with the internal and external audiences we aim to reach, and work with the communication staff and media design teams at INC, as well as the leadership team. So in our communication workshop last week, we had a number of participants where we worked on the phase 1 and moving into phase 2 brainstorming for this key message development for the NAESS Adverse Event Severity tool. Our parent group was led by Katie Reginato Cascamo and Jennifer Daigle. Our nursing group was led by Lane Beaumont and Wakako Elkland. Our regulatory group was led by Agnes Klein, and our industry group was led by Mary Short. The physician group was led by myself. And we made some very nice progress. I'd like to share some of the common themes that are coming out of this very preliminary work, with the understanding that we are just moving between phase 1 and phase 2. For the NAESS, the overarching main key message is that the safety of infants is important to all stakeholders in clinical research. But beyond this, each stakeholder key message is emerging, as highlighted here. That the NAESS was developed with input from multiple stakeholders, parents, nurses, physicians, and representatives of industry and regulatory agencies. That neonates are different than older children and they need adverse event instruments that capture their complexity. The parents and nurses are reminding us of their unique insight into an infant's change in baseline, and the existing severity scores do not meet the needs of neonates. The second major theme that's emerging is that the NAESS is the first neonatal specific adverse event severity grading instrument. Individual stakeholder key messages are being developed. They include that the NAESS can be used by local investigators, sponsors, and regulatory groups. They can help inform pharmacovigilance reviews, pediatric safety reports, and benefit risk assessments. The NAESS mapping to the MEDRA medical dictionary and standard terminology supports these regulatory processes, and the validation work is ongoing, which you're going to hear about in the next presentation. Also, that education is needed, and we are reminded by all of our stakeholder groups that education is needed for all of us, including the parents and the nurses who would like to see more education about safety in clinical trials so that they can engage and offer and participate in the surveillance of neonates to promote safety. So in conclusion, the MASH Inc. Key Message Project is well underway in the Communications Work Group. We welcome your suggestions. We began this project with a retrospective look at the NAESS publication and to focus on safety. However, key message development can occur much earlier. And so for all active INC work groups, I'd like you to remember that communication work group liaisons are available to proactively work with you and consider key message development across different stakeholder groups. Thank you. I'm now going to turn the platform over to Dr. Tamara Lewis from Children's Mercy Kansas City for an update from the Safety Work Group.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm very happy today to present a work group on behalf, or an update on behalf of the Safety Work Group. The Safety Work Group is co-chaired by Carol Algart and Bob Ward, and I'm presenting on behalf of the work group today because I've led one of the major initiatives over the past year. This is a list of members of the Safety Work Group, and everyone met last week on the 22nd. It was a very productive meeting, and I'm going to present our annual successes and also the results of that work group meeting today. So there's been a big push to operationalize the neonatal adverse event severity scale. The Safety Work Group decided to focus on this as an initial, very important step to improve safety monitoring for neonatal clinical trials. And so there have been many study participants for the validation studies listed on this slide here, and I led the retrospective study, which we will discuss today. So the neonatal adverse event severity scale was discussed by Dr. Wade in the last presentation, but was developed and published in 2019. And so the next step after development of such a new tool is to validate it. And the publication is shown on this slide. If you haven't read it as a member of INC, please do. And basically the tool is a combination of a generic scale, which can be used for any neonatal adverse event, and then 35 AE-specific tables that can be used for commonly observed neonatal adverse events. So Since the last INC meeting, the safety work group has designed and completed the first validation of the NAESS, and this was done retrospectively. We used real-world neonatal clinical trial data provided by Dr. John Davis and engaged 12 INC members to score these neonatal adverse events and performed an inter-rater reliability study. The results of this study showed that the NAESS used in a real-world fashion had moderate inter-rater reliability, which is consistent with other adverse event scores used in other patient populations. There were many lessons learned from this retrospective validation study. One is that although there are standardized AE case report forms, the amount and richness of data that are actually found on these individual AE report forms is highly variable. And so the reviewers in the study had difficulty feeling confident assigning a severity score to many AEs because the forms lack important details. The second lesson learned is that all of the reviewers didn't consistently use the tool the way the study team imagined that they would. And so this finding really highlights the need for standardized education around the use of the tool as we roll it out into more extensive use. And the third major lesson learned was that reviewers do not prefer the generic table. So oftentimes they would find an AE-specific table that was related to the adverse event of interest, but the tool could be improved by addition of more extensive AE-specific tables. So the study results were discussed at the safety work group meeting, and we made next steps. And then the manuscript is currently under review by the INC coordinating committee. The email will be sent out shortly. The next steps from this retrospective validation are questions that were raised in the safety work group meeting. Can the neonatal adverse event case report forms be improved or standardized? And optimally, we could have a version of case report forms that are really neonatal specific and collect the key data needed to severity score neonatal AEs, and then the need to create a standard training module for the tool. The second big push in the safety work group is to design and conduct a prospective validation. And this top of this slide says retrospective validation, but it's supposed to say prospective validation. And this is being led by Thomas Sillett, who was the one of the key people that created the original tool. And the group of principal investigators met shortly after the last annual INC meeting and designed a prospective validation study. There are 4 international sites that are involved in this prospective validation listed on the slide. I'm leading the site at Children's Mercy. And all of the sites are IRB approved and currently enrolling. So some of the key aspects to the prospective validation study are that unlike the retrospective validation, where the reviewers only had access to case report forms, in the prospective validation, the AE reviewers in the study are collecting data in real time as the AEs occur. So they have access to the bedside team and can talk to doctors and nurses and parents about the AE and collect more rich data in order to score the severity. And it's a 3-phase study. In phase 1, the site reviewers will use a generic AE severity score or do whatever their standard of care is locally currently. In the middle of the study, there will be extensive training on the NAESS tool. And then in phase 2, we will ask the local reviewers to use the tool to score AEs with the hypothesis that we will see improved inter-rater reliability after the training portion of the study. On the next slide, I have an example of the training module that was developed by Thomas and his group at Leuven, and it is PowerPoint based, but very extensively goes through the details of the NAESS tool and tells the local reviewers exactly how it can be optimally used, which is different than the retrospective study, where really we gave the tool to a group of novice users and let them kind of figure out how to use it. So the prospective study is going to complement the retrospective study very well. So what are the plans for the next year within the safety work group? The first goal is to complete, analyze, and publish the prospective validation study data. We've been thinking about how to really message. Dr. Wade talked about the communications work group, but even within the safety work group, we've been thinking about how to really message the two studies, the two validation studies. And I think one thing that we should do is think of a target journal where we could publish an editorial about the tool validation, really combining lessons learned from both the retrospective and prospective studies, and then what are the next steps to really roll this out into common use. In addition, there's an INC session at the PAS meeting in 2021, and so the goal is to present the data from the prospective validation study at the PAS meeting. The second goal is to really engage regulatory bodies to understand their impression of the tool and, what would be required from a regulatory end to really get this used for, drug labeling studies in neonates. And so really engaging that group of stakeholders. And then third, one of the themes that came out of the safety work group meeting is that a key step in optimal use of the NAESS is standardizing and improving the case report forms currently used in neonatal clinical trials. And so the safety work group needs to investigate the regulations that dictate AE form design, see how customizable they are for the neonatal population. And for this work, we'd like to form kind of a sub-work group just to focus on CRF design and how modifiable that is. And so if anyone is interested within the safety work group or in INC overall, please contact the safety work group leaders to let them know you're interested in being part of that work. One topic that came up was the potential for a white paper, where we can basically say we have this new tool, but the optimal use of the tool is impeded by imperfect case report forms, and these could be potential best practices. Although neonates would benefit from this white paper, we could also aim it to influence best practices in pediatric and adult populations. And then lastly, really focusing on implementation science. Now that we have this new tool, now that we're going to have it validated, how can we really operationalize it and spread the use of the scale? So lastly, I just want to say thank you from the safety work group for all of the support from INC members in completing the retrospective study. And to get us onto the next portion of the presentation, we are going to hear a short video about the work of the International Neonatal Consortium.
It's been said that neonates are therapeutic orphans. Most drugs used for newborns in the NICU are used off-label. In 2015, Critical Path Institute, or CPATH, launched the International Neonatal Consortium, INC, to bring together stakeholders to serve unmet drug development needs in neonates. INC's members consist of a diverse array of globe-spanning organizations and professionals sharing their research, experience, and insights. These groups assemble disparate sets of data and expertise to make a positive impact in the lives of NICU babies and their families. This multidisciplinary approach fosters well-executed clinical trials, resulting in higher quality care and safer and better treatments. By aggregating and standardizing data, we will reveal consensus-based, real-world evidence in newborn outcomes that will accelerate drug development. Actionable tools such as the standardized neonatal adverse event severity scale, scales to define common sources of blindness in preemies, methods to identify and treat neonatal gastrointestinal injury, and the standardization of blood pressure measurement all reduce variability in clinical trial protocols and improve routine clinical care. INC draws on CPATH's expertise in data aggregation, analysis, and regulatory science to enable evidence-based research. A real-world data and analytics platform will collect medical record data to create disease natural history models. Neonatology is a data-rich community. This data will improve clinical practice and fast-track safe and effective treatments reaching the NICU and help INC fulfill its twofold mission. INC's multidisciplinary collaborations emphasize family involvement. In the future, INC will evaluate how conditions during pregnancy can impact neonatal treatment. Together, we can achieve the fastest global response to improve care for this underserved population. The benefits of our work will extend to families, caretakers, and to all of those involved in neonatal medicine and its development. All of this happens because of our devotion to the sole focus of our work, the baby. Babies will have better care tomorrow because of the work we are doing today. So we want to say thank you to everyone involved in the mission of INC for all you're doing every day for babies everywhere.